The Prospector's Secret, Complete Story 3 Chapters. Chapter 1. The Discoverith autumn wind howled through the Colorado mountains as for orphan boys, huddled around their meager campfire, trying to stay warm in the thin mountain air. They'd been traveling for 6 weeks now, ever since the orphanage in Denver had burned down and left them with nowhere to go. At 15, Marcus Thompson had become the reluctant leader of their small group, responsible for keeping his 3 younger companions alive in the harsh wilderness. "I can see smoke," whispered Jamie, the youngest at only 8 years old. His bright blue eyes peered through the swirling snow toward a distant ridge. "There's someone else up here." Marcus squinted in the direction Jamie was pointing. Sure enough, a thin line of smoke rose from what looked like a small cabin nestled against the rocky mountainside, barely visible through the pine trees. "Could be dangerous," warned Peter, who at 12 had seen enough of the world's cruelty to be naturally suspicious. "Mountain folk don't usually welcome strangers." The third boy, 11-year-old Simon, shivered uncontrollably despite being wrapped in their only blanket. "We're going to freeze to death if we stay out here another night," he said through chattering teeth. "Maybe we should take the chance." Marcus felt the weight of leadership pressing down on his young shoulders. Their food was almost gone. Simon was showing signs of frostbite, and the weather was getting worse by the hour. The cabin might be their only hope of survival, even if it meant facing an unknown threat. "We'll approach carefully," he decided. "If there's trouble, we run. But we need shelter, and we need it now." The journey to the cabin took them 2 hours of difficult climbing through deepening snow. As they got closer, Marcus realized something was wrong. The smoke was coming from a chimney, but there were no lights in the windows, no sounds of human activity. The whole place felt abandoned despite the evidence of a recent fire. The cabin itself was small, but well built, constructed from sturdy logs that had weathered many mountain winters. A covered porch stretched across the front, and Marcus could see mining equipment scattered around the yard. Pickaxes, pans, and what looked like a crude sluice box suggested this was a prospector's claim. "Hello," Marcus called out as they approached the porch. "Anyone home?" Silence greeted them, broken only by the whistle of wind through the pine boughs. Jamie tugged on Marcus's sleeve. "The door's open," he whispered. "Indeed." The heavy wooden door stood slightly ajar, moving gently in the breeze. Marcus approached cautiously, his hand on the hunting knife that was their only weapon. Inside, the cabin was warm from the fire still burning in the stone fireplace, but there was no sign of its occupant. A simple table held the remains of a half-eaten meal, as if someone had just stepped outside for a moment. But dust on the dishes and the musty smell in the air suggested the cabin had been empty for weeks, maybe months. "Look at this," Peter said, pointing to a corner where mining tools were neatly arranged alongside leather-bound ledgers and rolled maps. Whoever lived here was serious about prospecting. Simon had found a pot of stew still hanging over the fire, though it had long since burned to a blackened crust. "They left in a hurry," he observed. "Everything's still here," as the boys explored the small cabin. Grateful for the warmth and shelter, Marcus noticed something odd about the floor. Near the back wall, several floorboards didn't quite match the others, and when he knelt down to examine them, he realized they could be lifted. "Help me with this," he called to the others. Together, they pried up the loose boards to reveal a hidden compartment beneath. The floor inside was a wooden crate, heavy and securely fastened with metal clasps. When Marcus lifted the lid, all 4 boys gasped in amazement. The crate was filled with documents unlike anything they'd ever seen. Maps drawn on animal hide showed the locations of mines throughout the Colorado Territory, marked with symbols and notations in multiple languages. Official-looking papers bore government seals and signatures. Most intriguingly, there were dozens of assay reports documenting the discovery of gold, silver, and other precious metals in claims throughout the region. "This is worth a fortune," Peter breathed, holding up a map that showed the locations of what appeared to be dozens of successful mines. But it was Jamie who made the most important discovery. At the bottom of the crate, wrapped in oiled cloth, was a leather journal filled with handwritten entries. The writing was in English, and as Marcus read the first few pages aloud, the mystery of the abandoned cabin began to unfold. October 15, 1889, Marcus read. My name is Ezekiel Morrison, and if someone is reading this, it means I'm probably dead and my secret has finally been discovered. For 30 years, I've been the unofficial record keeper for every major mining claim in the Colorado Territory. The government boys think they're keeping track, but they don't know the half of it. The journal went on to describe Ezekiel's role as a secret agent for Eastern mining interests, documenting legitimate claims while also identifying valuable properties that could be purchased or stolen through legal manipulation. But what started as simple industrial espionage had evolved into something much more significant. I've been protecting the small prospectors, the next entry read, when the big mining companies try to use fake legal documents to steal claims from honest miners, I've been creating counter documents to help the little guys fight back. This crate contains evidence of dozens of fraudulent claims by corrupt mining companies, along with the real documentation that proves who actually discovered these sites first. Subscribe to our channel for more incredible frontier adventures. You won't believe what these boys discover about the mining conspiracy. As Marcus continued reading, the scope of Ezekiel's activities became clear. He'd been a one-man resistance movement against the corrupt mining companies that were systematically cheating honest prospectors out of their claims. The documents in the crate represented years of careful documentation, enough evidence to expose a conspiracy that reached from the Colorado mountains all the way to the boardrooms of New York City. Listen to this, Marcus said, his voice growing excited. November 3, 1889. The Consolidated Mining Company filed false claims on the Henderson Creek find, using forged documents dated 3 days before old Pete Henderson actually made his discovery. But I have Pete's original assay report and witness statements that prove he was there first. When the time comes, these documents will restore his claim and expose Consolidated for the thieves they are. There were dozens of similar entries, each one documenting another case of a small prospector being cheated by powerful mining interests. But the most shocking discovery was yet to come. December 1, 1889, Marcus read, his voice dropping to a whisper. They know about me. A man came to the cabin today asking questions about my record-keeping activities. He claimed to be from the territorial government, but I recognize him as one of Consolidated's enforcers. I'm going to have to disappear for a while. Hide these documents where they'll be safe until someone honest can use them to set things right. That was the last entry in the journal. Simon looked around the empty cabin with new understanding. He never came back, he said quietly. But he left everything here for someone to find, Jamie added, his young mind grasping the significance of what they'd discovered. Peter was studying one of the maps intently. These claims, he said slowly, some of them are still active. Look at this notation here. It says the Murphy mine near Georgetown is based on fraudulent paperwork. If someone could prove that, the real owner could reclaim millions of dollars worth of gold. Marcus finished. As night fell and snow continued to pile up outside the cabin, the 4 orphan boys found themselves in possession of information that could reshape the entire Colorado mining industry. They had enough evidence to expose years of fraud and corruption, enough documentation to restore stolen claims to their rightful owners. But they also had a terrible responsibility. Ezekiel Morrison had died protecting these secrets, and now his mission had fallen to 4 children with no money, no connections, and no power to challenge some of the wealthiest men in America. As they settled in for the night around the warm fire, using Ezekiel's blankets and eating from his stored supplies, Marcus stared at the crate of documents and wondered what they were supposed to do next. They'd found shelter and safety in the abandoned cabin, but they'd also inherited a legacy that was far bigger than anything they were prepared to handle. Outside, the wind howled through the mountains, and somewhere in the distance, Marcus thought, he heard the sound of horses approaching through the snow. Whether it was his imagination or a real threat, he couldn't tell. But one thing was certain, their lives had just become far more complicated than for orphaned boys should ever have to handle. The prospector's secret was out, and there was no going back. Marcus woke to the sound of horses snorting in the cold morning air. Through the frost-covered window, he could see 5 mounted men surrounding the cabin, their breath creating clouds of vapor in the frigid dawn light. These weren't friendly. Travelers. They wore expensive coats and carried themselves with the confidence of men accustomed to getting what they wanted. Boys, Marcus whispered urgently, shaking his companions awake. We've got company. Peter was instantly alert, years of survival instincts kicking in. How many? 5 that I can see. They look like they mean business. Jamie and Simon huddled together near the fireplace while Marcus and Peter peered cautiously through the windows. The lead rider was a tall man with silver hair and cold gray eyes, wearing a fur-trimmed coat that probably cost more than most people earned in a year. He dismounted and approached the cabin door with purposeful strides. You boys in there. The man called out, his voice carrying the authority of someone used to being obeyed. My name is Harrison Blackwood, and I represent the Consolidated Mining Company. We know you're in possession of certain documents that belong to us. Marcus felt his blood turn to ice. This was exactly what Ezekiel Morrison had been afraid of. Somehow, the mining company had tracked them to the cabin. We don't know what you're talking about. Marcus called back, trying to keep his voice steady. Blackwood's laugh was cold and humorless. Son, we've been watching this cabin for months, waiting for someone to find old Ezekiel's hiding place. When we saw your smoke yesterday, we knew the wait was over. Now you can hand over those documents peacefully, or we can come in and take them. Either way, we're not leaving without them. Through the window, Peter could see the other riders spreading out to surround the cabin completely. They were trapped, with no way to run even if they could survive in the mountain wilderness. What documents? Simon whispered, though they all knew the answer. Marcus looked at the crate they'd hidden under Ezekiel's bed. Those papers represented the life's work of a man who'd died trying to protect honest miners from exactly these kinds of people. But they also represented a death sentence for orphan boys who'd stumbled into something far beyond their understanding. Listen carefully, Blackwood continued. Ezekiel Morrison was a thief and a fraud. Those documents were stolen from legitimate mining companies and contain false information designed to damage honest businesses. By harboring them, you boys are accessories to theft. Hand them over, and we'll consider this a simple misunderstanding. He's lying, Peter said quietly. Everything in that journal shows the mining companies were the thieves. I know, Marcus replied. But what can we do? There are 5 armed men out there, and we're just kids. That's when Jamie surprised them all. The 8-year-old boy stood up straighter and looked directly at Marcus with determination. That seemed far too mature for his age. Ezekiel Morrison hid those papers because they tell the truth. Jamie said firmly, my pa was a miner before he died. He always said the truth was the most valuable thing a man could leave behind. We can't let them destroy it. Simon nodded agreement. Jamie's right. Those papers prove that honest people got cheated. If we give them up, the cheating never stops. The sound of breaking glass interrupted their conversation as one of Blackwood's men smashed a side window with his rifle butt. Time's up, boys, Blackwood announced. We're coming in. Marcus made a split-second decision that would change all their lives. Peter grabbed the crate. Jamie, Simon, get the blankets and food. We're going out the back window. There's no back window, Peter pointed out. There is now, Marcus replied. Picking up Ezekiel's mining pickaxe, the rear wall of the cabin was made of logs, but between the stones of the foundation, Marcus could see daylight. Working frantically, he began chopping at the lowest log while Peter stuffed the most important documents into a leather satchel. The sound of the front door being forced open spurred them to desperate action as Blackwood and his men entered the cabin. The 4 boys squeezed through the hole Marcus had created and tumbled into the snow behind the cabin. Find them, Blackwood roared when he discovered the empty room and the escape route. But the boys had already disappeared into the dense pine forest that covered the mountainside. Marcus led them along a game trail he'd noticed the day before, hoping it would take them far enough away to lose their pursuers. For 3 hours, they climbed higher into the mountains, following deer paths and creek beds to avoid leaving obvious tracks in the snow. Jamie, the youngest, never complained despite the brutal pace, and Simon pushed through his exhaustion with grim determination. When they finally stopped to rest in a small cave, hidden behind a waterfall, Peter opened the satchel. to see what they'd managed to save. "We got the journal," he reported, "and about half the maps, plus some of the ASSI reports." "Is it enough?" Marcus asked. Peter studied the documents they'd rescued. "Look at this," he said, pointing to a map that showed mining claims throughout the region. "These 3 mines near Georgetown, the Silverton claims in the San Juan Mountains, and the placer operations along Clear Creek." According to Ezekiel's notes, all of them were stolen using forged documents. "But who's going to believe for orphan boys?" Simon asked practically. Jamie had been quiet during their escape, but now he spoke up with an idea that surprised them all. "The newspaper," he said simply. "My pa always said newspapers were supposed to tell people the truth when the government wouldn't." Marcus considered this. The Denver Post had a reputation for taking on powerful interests, and their reporter, Samuel Richards, was known for investigating corruption in the territorial government. "It could work," Peter agreed. "If we can get to Denver with these documents, that's a big if," Marcus pointed out. "Blackwood and his men are probably tracking us right now, and we don't even know the way to Denver from here." But Simon had found something else in the satchel that changed everything. Hidden among the documents was a small leather pouch containing gold coins, enough money to buy horses, supplies, and safe passage to Denver. "Ezekiel thought of everything," Simon said with admiration. "Subscribe to our channel now. The dangerous journey to Denver will test these brave boys like never before." That night, as they huddled together in the cave for warmth, Marcus read more entries from Ezekiel's journal by the light of a small fire. The old prospector's words painted a picture of systematic corruption that went far beyond simple claim jumping. March 15, 1889. Marcus read quietly. "Met with Sarah Murphy today. Consolidated Mining forced her family off their claim using fake territorial surveys. That showed their property boundaries wrong. She has the original survey documents that prove Consolidated's maps are fraudulent, but no lawyer will take her case. These people aren't just stealing gold, they're stealing families' entire futures." April 2, 1889. The Henderson family gave up fighting for their claim today. After 6 months of legal battles they couldn't afford, they're moving back east. Consolidated will start mining their land next week, using the very equipment old Pete Henderson invented to process the ore. They steal the land. Then they steal the innovations too. Each entry revealed another family destroyed. Another honest miner cheated out of their life's work. But the entries also showed Ezekiel's growing determination to fight back. May 20, 1889. "I've decided to take action. If the territorial government won't protect honest miners, then I'll create my own system of justice. Every fraudulent claim, every forged document, every bribed official, I'm going to document it all. Someday, someone will be able to use this evidence to set things right." Peter looked up from studying the maps. He wasn't just keeping records, he realized. He was building a case. All of this evidence, it's organized like a lawyer would organize it, because he was planning to take it to court, Marcus added, understanding dawning on his face. "That's why Blackwood is so desperate to get these documents. They're not just evidence of past crimes, they're evidence that could be used in court right now." As the fire burned lower and the boys prepared to sleep, they could hear sounds in the distance that might have been wind through the trees, or might have been search parties still looking for them. Either way, they knew tomorrow would bring new dangers as they attempted to carry Ezekiel Morrison's life work to safety. But they also knew they carried something more valuable than gold or silver. They carried the truth and the hope that somewhere in Denver, someone would be brave enough to help them use it. The prospector's secret had become their mission, and failure would mean not just their own deaths, but the continued suffering of every honest miner in the Colorado Territory. 5 days later, 4 exhausted but determined boys stumbled into the offices of the Denver Post, clutching a leather satchel that contained enough evidence to bring down the most powerful mining company in Colorado Territory. The journey from the mountains had been harrowing, with Blackwood's men never more than a day behind them. But they'd finally made it to safety. Samuel Richards, the newspaper's investigative reporter, looked up from his desk to see 4 dirty, underfed children standing in his doorway. His first instinct was to direct them to the charity office down the street. But something in the oldest boy's eyes made him pause. "Mr. Richards," Marcus said, his voice hoarse from days of cold mountain air, "we have information about corruption in the Colorado mining industry. Information that could save a lot of honest people from being cheated." Richards had been investigating rumors about Consolidated Mining for months, but every lead had disappeared and every witness had suddenly become reluctant to talk. Now these children were claiming to have evidence. What kind of information? He asked carefully. Peter stepped forward and placed the satchel on Richard's desk. "Documents that prove Consolidated Mining has been using forged territorial surveys and fake legal papers to steal claims from legitimate prospectors. We have maps, ASSI reports, witness statements, and a detailed journal documenting 30 years of fraud." Richards opened the satchel and immediately recognized the significance of what he was seeing. The maps alone represented weeks of careful documentation, and the official seals on some of the documents were clearly authentic. "Where did you get these?" he asked. Over the next 2 hours, the boys told their story. They explained about finding Ezekiel Morrison's cabin, discovering the hidden crate, and being pursued by Harrison Blackwood and his men. Richards listened with growing excitement as he realized he was looking at the biggest story of his career. "Boys," he said finally, "what you've brought me is enough to expose the largest mining fraud in territorial history. But it's also enough to get you killed. Harrison Blackwood isn't just a company representative. He's a man who makes problems disappear permanently." "We know the danger," Marcus replied, "but we also know what happens if we do nothing. More families lose everything they've worked for, and the people who cheated them get richer." Richards studied the young faces before him. These children had risked their lives to bring him this evidence, and they'd done it not for money or fame, but because they believed in doing what was right. "All right," he decided. "Here's what we're going to do. First, I'm going to verify everything in these documents. Then we're going to publish a story that will shake Colorado territory to its foundations. But we need to move fast, because once word gets out that you've contacted the newspaper, Blackwood will stop at nothing to silence you." The next 72 hours were a whirlwind of activity. Richards worked round the clock to confirm the authenticity of Ezekiel's documents, while the boys stayed hidden in a safe house arranged by the newspaper's editor. Telegraph messages flew between Denver and territorial offices in Colorado Springs, Santa Fe, and even Washington, D.C. The verification process revealed the true scope of the conspiracy. Consolidated Mining hadn't just been stealing individual claims, they'd been systematically manipulating the entire territorial survey system, bribing officials to alter boundary markers and creating false documentation that made legitimate claims appear invalid. "Look at this," Richards said, showing the boys a map he'd obtained from the territorial surveyor's office. This official map shows the Henderson Creek claim as belonging to Consolidated Mining, with a discovery date of June 1, 1887. But Ezekiel's documents prove that Pete Henderson filed his claim on May 15, 1887, with witnesses and proper documentation. Simon studied the two maps side by side. "They changed the dates," he said, "but they couldn't change the geology. Look, both maps show the same ore vein, the same water sources, everything. The only difference is who gets credit for finding it first." "Exactly," Richards confirmed, "and we found dozens of similar cases. The Murphy Silver Mine, the Clearwater Placer operation, the Twin Peaks Gold Strike, all of them stolen using the same method." But the most shocking discovery came when Richards traced the ownership structure of Consolidated Mining itself. The company wasn't just based in Colorado. It was owned by a consortium of Eastern investors that included several prominent politicians and at least one federal territorial judge. "This goes all the way to Washington," Richards told his editor. "We're not just exposing a mining company. We're exposing a network of corruption that reaches the highest levels of territorial government." The editor, a grizzled veteran of frontier journalism named Thomas Walsh, grinned with anticipation. "Then we'd better make sure we get it right the first time, because we're only going to get one chance before they try to shut us down." Subscribe to our channel for more incredible stories of courage triumphing over corruption. You won't believe how this ends. The story broke on a Tuesday morning with headlines that could be read from 3 blocks away. Massive mining fraud exposed and orphan boys uncover territorial corruption. The Denver Post printed twice its normal run, and copies sold out within hours. The reaction was immediate and explosive. By noon, angry crowds had gathered outside Consolidated Mining's Denver offices. The territorial governor announced an immediate investigation. Most importantly, families who'd lost their mining claims began coming forward with their own evidence of fraud. Sarah Murphy, whose family had been forced off their silver claim, appeared at the newspaper office with tears in her eyes and documents that corroborated everything in Ezekiel's records. "I can't believe someone finally listened," she said to the 4 boys who'd made it all possible. "My husband died thinking he'd failed our family, never knowing that we'd been cheated by criminals." Pete Henderson, now in his 70s and living in poverty in Denver, read the story and immediately contacted Richards with additional evidence about his stolen claim. "I kept copies of everything," he said, his weathered hands shaking as he showed them his original survey documents. "For 30 years, I've been telling anyone who'd listen that my claim was stolen. Now finally, someone believes me." Within a wake, the Territorial Attorney General had filed criminal charges against Harrison Blackwood and 6 other Consolidated Mining executives. Federal marshals arrested the corrupt territorial judge who'd been accepting bribes to validate fraudulent claims. Most importantly, a special territorial court was established to review and restore stolen mining claims. But the story's most powerful moment came when the 4 boys were invited to testify before the territorial legislature about their discovery of Ezekiel Morrison's evidence. Jamie, the youngest, stood before the assembled legislators and spoke with a clarity that silenced the entire chamber. Ezekiel Morrison died trying to protect people he'd never met from being cheated by people who already had more money than they could ever spend, the 8-year-old said. "He taught us that sometimes the most important thing you can do is tell the truth, even when it's dangerous. We didn't find those documents by accident," Marcus added. Ezekiel left them where honest people would eventually discover them, because he believed that truth always finds a way to come to light. The legislative session ended with the passage of the Colorado Mining Protection Act, which established new safeguards against claim fraud and created a fund to compensate families who'd lost their property to corrupt practices. 6 months later, the 4 boys stood on the porch of a small house in Denver, watching the sunrise paint the Rocky Mountains in shades of gold and pink. The house had been purchased with reward money from the territorial government, and it served as both their home and the headquarters of the Morrison Foundation, which they'd established to help other orphaned children. Samuel Richards had become their legal guardian, and together they'd written a book about their adventure that was selling throughout the Western territories. But more importantly, they'd proven that for children with courage and determination could take on the most powerful corrupt interests and win. "Do you think Ezekiel would be proud of what we did?" Simon asked as they prepared for another day of helping other children find homes and opportunities. Marcus looked out at the mountains where their adventure had begun, thinking about the old prospector who'd spent his life protecting people he'd never met. "I think he's smiling somewhere," Marcus replied. "We kept his promise. We made sure the truth came out." Peter nodded toward a letter they'd received that morning from Pete Henderson, who'd successfully reclaimed his mining operation and was now one of the most successful independent miners in Colorado. 37 families have gotten their claims back, Peter reported, and Harrison Blackwood is spending the next 20 years in territorial prison. Jamie held up a telegram from Sarah Murphy, whose family had not only reclaimed their silver mine, but discovered it was worth far more than they'd ever imagined. She says the Murphy silver mine is going to employ half the town of Georgetown, Jamie announced. "All because we found those papers." Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories of ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Hit that subscribe button now, because these tales of courage and justice from the American frontier will inspire you to believe that anyone can make a difference. As they walked into town for another day of helping other children find their place in the world, The four boys carried with them the knowledge that they'd honored Ezekiel Morrison's legacy. In the best possible way, they'd taken his secret and turned it into justice, his hidden truth, and made it a beacon of hope for everyone who'd ever been cheated by those in power. The prospector's secret had become a testament to the power of courage, the importance of truth, and the unbreakable bonds formed when people choose to do what's right. No matter how dangerous it might be, your subscription helps us continue bringing these incredible tales of frontier justice to life. Subscribe now and join us for more amazing adventures.